Almost 6 years ago, we rescued this little dog. But a year ago, we rescued this car. Little over a year ago is when we purchased this 2022 Tesla Model 3 from Hertz Car Sales. It used to be a Hertz rental car, and in its life as a rental car, in 2 short years, it racked up 57,000 miles. Reasonably sure that 99% of that was fast charging, done at superchargers. That's why we refer to this car as a rescue.
Yeah, the fast charging is a little hard on the car. It's not really great for it to do it every time.
And about a month after we got the car, I had a lot of questions, and I figured it would be a good idea to make a video just answering those questions. And so a few weeks ago, I put up a community post asking, what do you want to know about the car now that we've had it for a year? And I got 2 questions that we'll address on that post. And since it was only 2, I brought back the 4 questions from last year and see if a year's worth of ownership has changed any of our perspective on that. Now, Rachel and I are going to kind of double team this. Let's get to the first question.
Joe Craig 878 says, a comparison between living with the Bolt and living with the Model 3 would be great. I traded in my Bolt several years ago to get a Model 3 and love to hear how others that have done so as well feel about the transition.
It was a very easy transition, I would say. They're both electric vehicles. We both get they both handle charging at home fine. The only difference is I have to plug an adapter in because our wall box is a J1772, but that takes no extra time. So living with them is great as far as day-to-day usage. I would say really no difference. There's a couple of minor things that are an issue with the Tesla and a couple of minor things that are an issue with the Bolt, and there are some convenience things that the Tesla takes kind of the win. So let me deal with those kind of one at a time. The first convenience thing that kind of goes to the Bolt is the charge port door being spring-loaded. You just push it and it opens, and it does that in any kind of weather. A couple of weeks ago, we had a freeze for North Texas. It was 12 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very cold for North Texas. I know that there are other places in the country that's a balmy day in the beginning of February, but not for us. And there was just enough precipitation to get a little film of ice, and the charge port door on the Tesla froze shut. And I conditioned the car. I had the climate going. I used up 7% of the battery trying to get it to thaw out enough to unfreeze so that the charge port door would actually open. And I ended up having to use a hair dryer on it. And about 5 minutes with the hair dryer, and it was fine. Never had that issue with the Bolt. So that one's kind of a win for the Bolt as opposed to the Tesla. The little win that's going to go to the Tesla over the Bolt is our wall box and our Bolt have disagreements with each other if it's raining. We don't have a garage. We charge outdoors, and our wall box will charge the Bolt to full even if it's raining, but when it shuts off, after it's finished charging, it trips the breaker, and I have to reset the breaker before the wall box will work again. And the Bolt is the only one of our EVs that will do that. That doesn't happen with the Tesla. It doesn't happen with the Fiat. It doesn't happen with the Harley. Yeah. It only happens with the Bolt, and I don't know why that is.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. The other thing that the Tesla has better is the app is a lot better. So if you're sitting in the house, you have much better information and control over the car from just your phone that you don't have really with the Bolt.
And that was going to go into the convenience thing that I was going to say was a big win for the Tesla. The app is a night and day difference between the My Chevrolet app that you can use for checking in on the Bolt state of charge and scheduling and remote starting compared to the Tesla app. The Tesla app launches magnitudes faster than the My Chevrolet app. It doesn't glitch out. The My Chevrolet app sometimes glitches out for me. And it's so easy to use that app that I can set a schedule on this car that is fire and forget in the winter, that this is the time I leave for work in the morning. And I just took 10 seconds on my phone to set that schedule, and my car's warm, my battery's warm when it's time for me to leave, even when it is 12 degrees outside.
Yeah, that Tesla integrated app really is extremely well thought out, and it's much easier to use than the one on the Bolt.
This,
The Bolt is just simpler and just not as well made.
the app, that is.
The app.
Not the car. We love the car. We love the Bolt.
The app is not
The My
as good.
Chevrolet app is really not great.
Yeah.
But another thing that I wasn't expecting, and I always think of this as a wow on this car, is the little things. These are not things that you would go out and buy the car for. Like, for instance, today we're out doing our errands that includes curbside pickup at a grocery store. And when I do that curbside pickup, my phone sends me a notification, do I want to add this pickup time to my calendar? And I hit, yes, I do. And it adds it to my calendar. That's all I have to do is hit that. When I get into the car after I've done that, it's already got the navigation set up to the grocery store, which is kind of neat. It is definitely not something that would be a reason for me to want to buy the car, but it's a nice little convenience thing that I like. The Bolt doesn't have that because it doesn't have the integrated navigation. So that's kind of just what it's like to live with it. I'm assuming that you mean everyday life. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's go on to the next one.
Joseph PT9540 asks, share your experience of range with LFP battery in cold and extreme heat conditions. Now, you actually have some full videos on that you did this year. So those will be linked in the description. You can go and watch the whole videos, but give us the Cliff Notes on that.
Cliff Notes is LFP battery in this car likes heat more than it likes cold. I haven't had any issues with charging in cold, and again, the coldest it got this winter for us was about 12 degrees. As far as the actual temperature, wind chill, I think the coldest it got was -5 degrees Fahrenheit. So I don't know that I would consider that super extreme, but it did get to 110 Fahrenheit over the summer.
That's pretty hot.
It doesn't mind heat. I get a bigger efficiency loss in the winter because it just takes more energy, even with the heat pump that this car has, to heat up the cabin than it does to cool off the cabin. But I will say, compared with the Bolt, going back to the first question, that in temperatures of around 28 Fahrenheit to 34 Fahrenheit, or, I would not have the heater on in the Bolt. I would just be relying with the heated seats and the heated steering wheel and be wearing a big heavy coat. In this car, I leave the climate control on, and I still get better efficiency with the climate control on in this car than I did with the Bolt, with all of the heating turned off, because I would still take that hit because of the cold temperature. In heat, what's going to use up the extra energy in my efficiency is the air conditioner, because I don't like to be hot. I just don't like to be hot. I could run with the windows down, but no, I don't want to. I did do a full range test on the car, but I did it in June, and it was 90 degrees-ish, 90 to 95. And there is a hit, but that's because of the air conditioner, not because of how the battery is reacting.
Now, also, I want to add, we did add sunshades to the inside so that in the summertime, we do have that glass roof covered. I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but it does at least reduce that greenhouse
It's huge.
effect. Yeah, so if you live in a hot climate and, your Tesla normally will not come with shades, but you can get them aftermarket, and we recommend it.
Leaving work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the end of May, I can tell you it's huge. If I accidentally leave the window shades open, it's a good 25 degrees hotter in that car than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, which is actually a benefit in the wintertime. If it's sunny but cold, you can leave those window shades open, and that greenhouse effect will warm up your interior of the car a little bit for you.
Now, since that question asked specifically about the LFP battery, I will say one thing about it, and because of the LFP battery not minding the heat, is even though we believe that this car was driven 57,000 miles doing 99% supercharging as a rental, the battery had only degraded 5%. And that was checked through Tessie, and over the course of the year, it's still at 5%. And we've taken it on multiple road trips and all of that. So that's one advantage of the LFP battery. As long as you don't live in a super, super, super cold climate and you're relying on fast charging, because if the battery's cold, it won't want a fast charge. It's going to maintain its life a lot better. So where we live in Texas, it's a really good battery for us to have.
Yeah.
Let's scoot that way. All right. And now we've reached the point of the video where I'm having to go back to the questions that the viewers asked last year. So these questions have been addressed in
previous videos.
In a previous video, but this time we're going to answer them with a year's worth of perspective behind it.
Yeah.
So I think that that's going to be decent. So way back when, Tony M4813 asked, ride quality Tesla versus Bolt, charging experience comparison. Would you still road trip with Bolt now that you have Tesla? So first part, ride quality Tesla versus Bolt.
They're both good. I think the Tesla is maybe a little bit rougher ride quality. It has a little bit stiffer suspension, and it's not quite as smooth as the Bolt. The Bolt is actually surprisingly comfortable. Considering the price of the car, it's quite comfortable to road trip in. But that said, if we had to choose, which we do for road trips, we always choose the Tesla every time.
Since we got this car, we haven't road tripped the Bolt.
Yeah.
Just because the experience is so much easier with this car.
And that's because of the charging network.
Right.
It's not because of the car itself, it's because of the charging network. Well,
Yep.
some of it's because of the car, but yeah.
This car will charge faster. I get a peak charge rate on this car of 170 kilowatts. If we pull into a supercharger at around 10% state of charge, if I pulled into an Electrify America with the Bolt at around a 10% state of charge, the peak I'd get on that is 54 kilowatts. So this is going to take in energy a lot faster. The battery pack in this car is smaller than it is on the Bolt, and the efficiency is better on this car than it is on the Bolt by just a little bit. And so it doesn't take quite as much energy, and it takes it on faster, so we spend much less time at the charging stations. And even though it's only about 20, 30 seconds, maybe a minute worth of the charging experience with the Bolt, going to an Electrify America or something like that and messing around on the app to start charging, or even at EVgo where we're able to do auto charge or plug-in charge at an EVgo, it still takes that EVgo 30 to 40 seconds for the handshake to work. At a version 3 supercharger, it's about 8 seconds. At a version 2 supercharger, it's about 15 seconds. And you don't have to worry about it. It's a stress-free experience.
Right. In the Bolt, it's an adventure,
Yeah,
right?
it's much more adventurous.
It's harder to find a place to charge. It takes longer to integrate your app with your car. You have to go on your phone and do stuff. It takes longer for it to actually connect electronically, and the charging speed is lower. Plus, a lot of those Electrify Americas and other stations where you can charge the Bolt, they don't always work, and there aren't as many of them. So with the Tesla, it's just a completely different experience.
Now, before anybody comments, there is one thing that's different this time around this year compared to last year, is the Bolt is now capable of using any version 3 Tesla supercharger as long as you have the adapter. Now, we don't have our CCS to NACS adapter yet. And once we do, we'll do a video on that just to see what it's like. But we have tested the Handshake at a Tesla supercharger that had a Magic Dock connector with the Bolt, and it was 3 times longer than it was with the Tesla. It's seconds, but it's just that little extra added bit of blood pressure, wondering if it's going to start charging or not. That's really all that is. I would agree with you on the ride quality, and then one of the reasons is, in exchange for a slightly rougher ride in the Model 3, you get better cornering.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a trade-off. But yeah, I still think the charging, last year it was hypothetical when we were talking about the charging experience. This year, we know for sure. The charging experience is night and day better with this car.
Very different, yeah.
Tony Hernandez, 87, asked a year ago, what was the wear and tear like? Did you find the front bumper paint in bad condition? Any unexpected broken stuff? I answered this question last year and covered the bumper and the paint, and yes, it had paint swirls and chips and curb rash on the wheels. We found some other stuff though.
Well, there was a chip in the windshield, which has since cracked.
Which has since grown to about a 1.5 foot long crack that is going to necessitate replacing the windshield. Yes.
Not something you love, but it happens. It could happen to any car. The other is one of the cables to plug in your phone. I think it's a lightning cable.
It's a USB-C.
USB-C cable. It just doesn't work. So it's there, and it looks like you could plug it into your phone, but once you do, you realize it doesn't charge. So.
Where that is in our center console, the front center console. It's got 2 USB-C outlets down there, and the one on the right side has no power. So that is something that we didn't realize right away, but yes, that was one of the flaws that was with the car, because it was a rental that we didn't know when I did this video last year, but we know now.
But actually it doesn't really matter, because I mean, it doesn't affect me as a passenger. That would be what I would use, but it also has a wireless charging station right there, so all I do is just put my phone there, and that's way more convenient. I absolutely don't need that. I don't need that cable at all.
The other USB-C plug in that front console works fine. There's 2 USB-C outlets on the back of the center console for the rear seat passengers, and that's what I use to plug my phone in with its too fat case that can't charge on the wireless charger. Plus there's the 12-volt outlet in the top of the center console. There's plenty of outlets in the car that still work, so having that one that's not working isn't that big of a deal.
Doesn't really affect
but
us.
it's one of the things that makes the car not perfect. But it was 2 years old with 57,000 miles on it.
Exactly.
And now it's got about 83,000 miles on it in the year that we've driven it. So you can't expect it to be perfect with 57,000 miles.
There
and
was
I can live with
surprisingly
that.
little wrong with it, actually. Now, there are plenty of Teslas that you could have bought used that would have had more wrong with them. We looked at other cars, but this one had very little wrong with it.
26,654 miles. That's how many miles are showing on the trip odometer that I reset the day we brought the car home until right now when I just looked in the parking lot. Over the course of a year, 26,000 miles. That's why we can't lease a car, y'all.
Yeah, we drive too much. All right, so Ariel Batista asked 11 months ago, real world range test, not just what the car says, also how is the build quality? Thanks. And again, this is one that you did a range test earlier in the year. You want to talk about that?
I accepted that as a challenge. And as soon as I had enough time off from work to spend an entire day out driving, because it did take over 6 hours doing it, because I didn't want to do a highway range test. Heaven knows there's all kinds of highway range tests on electric vehicles from out of spec, TFL, a lot of EV YouTubers do highway. But I wanted to do one that was mixed driving. So I did a combination of highway, city street, county road, country road, state highway, all kind of mixed in one, and did like this 55-mile lap. And
it took all day.
It took all day, and
did it for you, y'all.
that's why it took all day. And by the time I got home, yes, the car said 258 miles when I left the house at 100% state of charge, but it really that time only did 227. But there were a couple of extenuating circumstances. It was between 90 and 95 degrees outside at the time, and I had just bought these tires literally 2 days before.
New tires.
So brand new tires were on the car, and that could have had a detrimental effect to the efficiency and the range. And the reason I'm saying that is we took a very long leg on our Virginia road trip, leaving, I forget the name of the town, I think it was Radford, Virginia, to Sevierville, Tennessee. We stayed at a hotel in Virginia, and our first supercharger was in Sevierville, and we wanted this to be a long leg in that road trip, and I've linked the road trip video as well, but because Hurricane Helene had just hit, and there were parts of that area that were without power, and that's not a good place to go with an electric vehicle if you need to charge. So we wanted to clear that path, and that meant we needed to clear 200 miles. And we got to that supercharger 200 miles later, and we're still showing 40 miles of range after driving. So I think that we could have beaten that 227, and that was all highway.
Yeah, which is usually the worst for an electric vehicle. But generally, it does better in the city.
That was at 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 60 degrees Fahrenheit as opposed to 95. And the tires at that point had several thousand miles on them. They were broken in. So I don't know, maybe this summer I'll try that real world range test again, or maybe I'll try it when it's not almost 100 degrees. But I do have that video there.
The answer is that those range tests that they tell you, the EPA stuff, and what the car says is pretty accurate, or it's even on the low side. We generally exceed that.
But Tesla does overestimate their range.
Yeah.
Tesla overestimates their range, and it's well known. And yes, this car says 258. I have no idea if I'm ever going to be able to pull that off.
Yeah.
But now it says 256, but such is life. But Inside EVs picked up that video, did an article about it, which is pretty cool. I kind of like that.
Nice Guy NY1 asked 10 months ago, your experience with Autopilot, both good and bad. I know you want to answer this one.
Okay, when that question was asked, I assumed then, and I'm going to assume now, that you're referring to full self-drive or FSD. The car has basic autopilot, and that's what's on it right now, which includes auto steer, adaptive cruise control, and I use that all the time. I use the adaptive cruise control. I absolutely love. Auto steer, I hardly ever turn on because it's not, well, I mean, if I have to change lanes, I have to disengage it. So if I have to pass somebody, I have to disengage it. As far as FSD, the full self-drive, in the year that we've owned the car, we've had 3 months of FSD. 2 of those were freebies that were given to us.
And one we
actually bought.
Because we were on a road trip and we really needed it.
After about 600 miles of one day's driving or maybe more, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to pay the money for a month and get FSD for this road trip. And on that road trip, I was very grateful to have it. It did great on the road trip. FSD excels on the highway, especially in traffic. And like I said, on that road trip, we were encountering Hurricane Helene was happening nearby, and so we had a lot of rain on one of those days. It rained like for 500 miles of the trip, and it was raining so bad that FSD would not go above 65. So it would speed limit because of the weather, but I had no complaints with FSD on that trip. The other 2 months that we got FSD was because of free trials that Tesla had out. And we did a bunch of videos about testing certain things with FSD and discovered through those tests that the ability of this car to handle the full self-drive software with the hardware that it has. This car has hardware 3 cameras in it instead of hardware 4. So they're not as high resolution. And this car is not ever going to be able to do unsupervised full self-driving because I think Tesla's even said it's only hardware 4 cars are going to be able to do that. But what a hardware 4 car can do with FSD, I'm going to imagine is going to be a whole lot better than what our hardware 3 car can do, because I'll use it for convenience, but it's better on the highways. Half of my commute is county roads and city streets, and it's not as good on the county roads because it has a hard time finding the lanes. It has a hard time knowing where the curves are coming up sometimes. It does know when dogs are out in the middle of the road, and it will stop for them, so that's good. But I was relieved when my FSD trial expired because that way I could just get my regular adaptive cruise control back. I could have done that anyway just by going into the screen and changing the setting, but I didn't want to do that. But road trips, FSD, even on a hardware 3 car, great to have. And should we take another big long road trip, I'll probably buy a month's worth of FSD subscription just for that road trip again. But when that month expires, I'll likely cancel it again. So that's all of the questions from last year and this year put together for our 1-year review. Do you have any final thoughts on the car?
Final thoughts, I actually love this car. I'm really glad we got it. You know, the Bolt we loved also. It was great, but there are just certain things, especially with the road trip, about this car that are just so much better. And of course, this is a more expensive car. It's a higher end car. We were able to get it for a shockingly low price because of how well you shop and because of just the circumstances surrounding the fact that it was a Hertz rental. But it is just, I really appreciate having this car, and I'm really glad we got it.
I'm glad that we got it too. I've been, for other reasons, looking around to see what other electric vehicles are out there in the price range, what good deals there could be, and just seeing, well, what could we move to from the Tesla? And there's nothing that can do what we need this car to do better than this car can.
It's just better in so many ways. The charging network is better than anything else out there. The efficiency is better than anything else out there.
That we can afford.
That we can afford. Well, yeah, but even the higher end cars generally.
I'm talking about a Lucid.
Oh, okay.
A Lucid is more efficient than this.
Okay, so there exists a car that is higher, but yeah, definitely not in this price bracket for sure. There's nothing else like it.
And but so yeah, this is our ride. This is our car, and we're going to be taking it on a few more road trips this year, at least one, because we've got the big one to Virginia coming up again in the fall.
Right.
But let us know if you have any other questions. We'll try to get them answered in the comments or something like that. But speaking of our Bolt, our Bolt recently tripped over to 50,000 miles.
Yeah,
so that video is going to be coming up soon. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that video when it comes out. Thanks for watching.